Alright, hi everybody. Welcome to my online session on hosting single-page apps in Azure. I'm streaming this from our own office today, and ready to get started. So, what we have on agenda is we'll go through the hosting options in Azure PaaS. Then we'll go through the common pitfalls, some basics about what single-page apps are in general, and what you should what is it that basically we are talking about. A little bit about securing the application secrets. Then I have also prepared a pretty nice demo for all of you, and then there's a short QA in the end. Alright, so jumping into the first part. So, about the hosting options. So, what are there really when it comes to hosting options in Azure? And I'm talking about ARM, so I'm talking about the newer stuff. We are not going to address the classic Azure. Traditionally, people start with app services. There you have the Windows, basically IIS-based workloads. There you already have this so-called URL rewrite module out of the box installed, so that all you need to do is basically configure what you need to redirect. On the Linux side, you can either run barely on the machine itself, or you can Dockerize and run using a Docker. And I highly recommend this second option, as it's much more easy to use, and you will run into fewer problems. Then, of course, you can host single-page apps in blob storage using this static website feature. That's pretty simple and easy to set up, but it's also very limited. Then these more kind of like for production use, you will always need a CDN. So in Azure, you have CDN in different flavors and different tiers. So here, when I'm referring to Verizon Premium, that's the most expensive tier you can find. But then Microsoft has also brought their own offering called Azure CDN Standard. And that has been improving a lot lately, and we'll discuss it in more detail later. Then it's also possible when you have like more complex needs, like you need to write some custom logic for the redirects and shots, then you can always put like a custom service in between the Azure CDN and the storage account. And there you can do handle all the necessary rewrites and custom headers that you need in your case. I will have an example on that as well. Not like a working example, but some reference architecture. But in this kind of setup, the custom service is basically acting as a reverse proxy. All right, so jumping into common pitfalls. So actually the reason why I wanted to give a presentation on this topic is that I've seen a lot of developers, and including myself, running into issues and problems when trying to get something as simple as a single-page app hosted in Azure. And this has improved a lot in the past couple of years, but before there was only very few options. Basically, actually the Verizon Premium CDN was the only option back in the days if you want to run some like a static website or a single page app in production use. But even until today, this Verizon Premium suffers from a lack of automation. So it doesn't offer an API for automating any of the settings or rules. So basically, when you make some changes, there's an actual human being accepting those changes, and it can take up to many hours, even for a single change of rule, and then you end up spending total days actually just configuring something and testing whether it works or not. So it's not a really good option. Now there are better options nowadays. Then this simple option of using just Azure Storage with this static website feature, it's very limited in functionality, as I mentioned before. It can handle only a very simple redirects, and you can specify only one path where you want the redirect to point to. There's also a possibility to catch 404s and point those to this error document path. But like I said, this is very simple, and if you have anything more complex like a multi-language website or you have some special URLs, relative URLs that you would like to handle somehow differently, then this won't work for you. Also, it doesn't give you any option to customize the headers. So in any case, if you want to use this, I would recommend it only for some testing or some like a documentation website, let's say. So it's not production for production use in itself. Then you can always use these. Well, I'm referring to Windows-based app services because there you have the URL rewrite module. If you would use the Linux-based one, then you would basically need to somehow implement those rewrites, like using Nginx or something else. But in Windows-based app services, there's the built-in module for doing this, and it's easy to use. But this is like, I wouldn't use app services for just simple static websites. It becomes very expensive. So then what should you use? I'm jumping into what is actually a single page app. This is maybe in the most simplest form. This is what I have in my demo. So I have a front-end application, a client that is implemented using React, and this is the default output I get when I run the npm build. So this is kind of like the minimum what you would have for the build output and what you would be deploying to the single page app. And so you have the files, then you will have some rewrite rules. You will need to do some amount of redirecting. You will need to have from HTTP to HTTPS. You will need to be able to from the root of the website point to the index HTML, and also from any subpath. Basically any subpath, you would need to redirect that to the same index HTML page. Okay, so this is a quite simple case where I have only one website and only one language version. And then third thing you would need would be some custom headers to make it secure, and these are what securityheaders.com is recommending to use. So you would have something like this. Okay, so then I'm jumping into an example of what kind of like an MVP single page application would look like in modern today's world in Azure. So I'm using as an example, this is just a picture of CDN profile, but this is now acting as a CDN endpoint. So you would have a CDN endpoint, you would have some domain, you would point to it with a CNAME record, and then it would read files from a storage account and from under a specific storage account. And for the origin settings, so there you would have origin type as storage. So CDN endpoint can integrate directly with storage account using this origin type, and you can just define the storage account blob storage default primary endpoint here. And then if you have, like in most cases, you need to have some blob container into root. So you would define that as the origin path here, so that you won't need to add that in the final URL. And you would have HTTP and HTTPS enabled, so that if there's a request coming with HTTP, you could then rewrite that to HTTPS. And like I mentioned, this is the kind of access level you would have. Actually, this is what you need to define for CDN endpoint to be able to read files from blob container. So it needs to have this blob access level. And since I also already mentioned about this Azure CDN Standard, which you can also kind of call the Microsoft's own CDN offering, there we have this new rules engine. It came out something like half a year ago, and currently you can define these rules. You can define one global rule and up to five these more specific rules. So here I have an example where I'm setting the cache expiration to 7 days as a global rule, and then I have default redirect to HTTPS rewrite rule and default URL rewrite rule, which works so that it will actually catch all the cases that I showed you in the previous slide, so that all requests for HTML pages are redirected to index.html. So this is what you would have as a minimum for a simple single page app. So this works quite well if you don't have any more complex needs. Of course, I'm not setting security headers here. That's something I need to investigate still, but that's definitely doable. But I need to find a way. There's currently not so good documentation in Microsoft's website on this new rules engine, so it's lacking some good examples. Then here's like a more advanced setup where, and for more complex needs, where you would have this custom service in between the CDN endpoint and the storage account. So actually the custom service is acting as a back end to the CDN endpoint, and it's reverse proxying requests to storage account. You could use a SAS token there, so that you can keep, especially if you need to keep this secure, so that you don't want any anonymous reads to be possible from storage account. This custom service can call the blobs using SAS token. But otherwise, it's close to what we have in the previous one, and you could have those rewrite rules also implemented in this custom service in this case. And here, since the custom service is the backend, you would have something like this. So this is an example if you have Azure function or function app or an app service, it will have this kind of default URL. So in that case, it would look like this. And for the origin path, you wouldn't have anything, because it's calling the CDN endpoint is calling the backend, and that is the one that is then calling the storage account. Okay, then a few words about securing application secrets. I have some examples on these in the demo. So for one, never put secrets in source control. That should be pretty standards, but I still see it quite often. Developers just don't pay too much attention to these, so you would want to put some automated checks in your repositories to check that there are no credentials left laying around in the source code. In Azure PaaS world, secrets are usually always stored to Key Vault. That's part of the de facto place. And Key Vault got this pretty new feature called references, which makes it possible to reference secrets from Key Vault without exposing the actual values of the secrets in app settings. So I highly recommend using that. And as a final thing, of course, you need to make sure that you apply least privilege to the Key Vault's own access policies, so that only the application is able to access those secrets. Then, of course, it's possible to use managed identities. It's a bit more limited where it works, but whenever you can, definitely utilize those. Even storage accounts support that nowadays. And then there's for containerized workloads, it's also possible to mount secret volumes. And that's also an option if you have a larger amount of secrets that you need to pass in to the containers. It might not be might not make sense to specify specific environment variables as secrets through app settings in this case. All right, then I'm soon jumping into the demo. So in the demo, I have prepared it so that we have CDN endpoint, of course. I have my own custom CNAME in use. I have an Azure DNS zone already running in my sandbox account, and I have a couple of CNAME records added for my resources there. Everything you can see here is automated. Only thing that's not automated in my setup is this one DNS zone where I'm adding those CNAME records. So CDN endpoint is calling fetching files from storage account. I showed you the reference picture before, and for this demo it's fetching data from LinkedIn API. So actually the front end, which is the CDN endpoint here, is fetches this authorization code from LinkedIn API, and then it passes it to this. I have a simple backend which I'm hosting in app service. So it's passing the authorization code to that, and that will then actually fetch the data. The reason I have it like this is that when I started doing this demo, I first, of course, when you start doing some front-end project, you just start coding, and then I thought that okay, I can do this everything in the front end, but then, well, of course, if you are hosting this as a single-page application, it's just pure HTML and resources, and so your credentials will be in the source code as well. So I didn't want to leak my LinkedIn apps client secret. So that's why I separated my fetching of data into this simple backend, so that I can secure at least my LinkedIn app secret. So that's the only reason. And you can see that I have two custom CNAMEs. So I have one for the CDN endpoint and other one for the backend. And I'm using app services received this pretty recently, these managed certificates. So I'm using what Azure is providing here for free. So I'm using that free service from Azure, both in App Service and CDN endpoint. So, demo time. I actually posted already before a link to my demo repository. So this is a public GitHub repository, and you can find this code there. I will just run this through quickly so that you get a general idea what's going on here. So I have the so-called backend. That's here in the root, so I didn't create a separate folder for that. So the backend code is actually just this server.js is the backend code, and I'm dockerizing that. Then I have the client in a separate folder and the infrastructure in another one. And then I also have some GitHub actions to do the CI pipelines and the deployment. So those you can find under GitHub, and you can also see the actions here, how they function. Let's see, it's not loading now, but I can show you the code also from VS Code if it's not opening here now. Let's hope that the portal at least works. Okay, that works. Good. So I'm actually jumping to VS Code site now so that you can see that we can continue from here. So I have the README file open here. So I will first show you when I run this locally, and then I will jump to Azure side. So I wrote down some simple instructions how you can run this yourself, but you need to create yourself your own app in LinkedIn Developers and configure that ID and secret for yourself. But basically, I have run already npm install for both the server and client, so I can just start running this. So run dev. So this command will start both the backend and the front end application in my local environment. So yeah, opens. So I have a simple sign in with LinkedIn button, and when I click that, it will open me a new window where I can give my LinkedIn credentials, and then it will fetch the data for my LinkedIn profile. So it will fetch my first name, last name, and then my profile picture. So if everything works, yeah, it worked. So that's the demo in essence, but the point here was not to make a awesome front-end application, but show you how this works in Azure and how I'm hosting it. So I'm closing this now. That and then I will show you the Azure side. So here I have a resource group where I have the Azure DNS zone already created before. So this is not under the infrastructure code, but I'm adding the CNAME records here from the infrastructure code. So these are already pointing to my both my CDN endpoint and my app service. So I have already provisioned this infra beforehand. I would have shown it to you from under actions. Okay, now it loads. So I have several pipelines here, but this SPA CD is the one that is doing the deployment. So this was the last deployment I run. I run it 5 hours ago, so I spin up my demo environment 5 hours ago, and there's two jobs it's doing. So first it's provisioning the infrastructure using Terraform. So I'm doing the normal commands. I'm doing init plan. Here on the plan you can see it's all the resources it's going to be creating and provisioning, and then it's doing the actual provisioning. And I actually also had to do a custom action for this because I'm running a couple of local execs from the Terraform code, and those wouldn't work using this pre-built or pre-done GitHub action from HashiCorp. So I had to do a custom action where it's actually building the image for my custom action here on the fly. I'm basically using the official Azure CLI image from Microsoft, and then I'm on top of that I'm installing their Terraform so that I can execute both the Terraform command and then run some Azure CLI commands during the execution of the Terraform. So that's the provisioning, and then I have the deployment side. So for deploying the client, I'm already provisioning the infra resources in the previous job. So here I'm basically copying static files to the storage account. Then I'm adding those couple of Azure CDN rewrite rules, which I cannot automate through Terraform yet. And then finally I'm invalidating the cache in CDN. So that's what happens. And here you can see I'm running npm install and build on the fly. Then I'm uploading the artifacts. Well, that's only for actually archive needs. But then this is the actual script that's doing all the heavy lifting. So I'm using copy to copy the files. That's the most efficient way to copy files to Azure Blob Storage, and then adding those CDN rules, and then finally it's purging the CDN endpoint, as you can see there. So end result is what goes into this other resource group. So everything inside this resource group is coming from the pipeline. And I can show you a couple of small details from here. So first off, I have the custom CNAME configured here. So it's here, and the HTTPS is enabled. So if I go to this URL now, I have my demo running here. So I'm checking from the console just how it loads. So you can see that if I go to HTTP, from HTTP it rewrites me to the HTTPS. Then if I go to something like la-di-la-di-la, it always redirects me back here. And yeah, and then there was the caching rule. So that's what was in the CDN rules. Then I can do this also as sign in. So this should work now. Okay, I had applied my credentials before and it fetched my data. So actually let's look at this again so that I can see. So it's making a request to my backend where I have the other custom CNAME configured, and it's HTTP 200. So if I actually can also show you that VS Code, if I curl my backend, it will give a 404 from the root, but then it will have it has only one endpoint linked in, and that's returning me bad request when if I don't provide the authorization code in the call. Okay, wanted to show you a couple of things still from this side. So the rewrite rules are here. As I already demoed, they are working. So they are the same I had in the presentation slides. Origin is set from the Terraform code like this. So exactly what I showed you in the slides. So that's all there, and this backend application has one secret configured. It's this linked-in client secret, and when I go to look at this, I'm actually referencing from the key vault the secret using the key vault's URL and the key of the secret and then the version. Okay, so now I can see if I had access to these resources in Azure, I could see that, okay, there's the secret. So why don't I go and look at the secret? But I'm now logged in using my own credentials, and this has been deployed using the service principal credentials I have created for the pipeline. So I don't have access to the secret myself. All right, I think that was about the resources. I will show you a few more things from here. So actually, if you are interested, I have all these instructions how you can run this yourself. I have also the Terraform code here, and instructions how to bootstrap your remote state, and that part. And there's also, I think, something that at least for me hasn't been so easy always, is how to test this kind of deployments locally. So I have instructions how you can run from locally using a Docker container and using this official Azure CLI image from Microsoft, and how to test it through that container image and verify that the script works. So that was my demo. Then let me see if I can find back to my slides. Okay, back to slides. So I have some links to resources and examples here also listed. One thing I would like to point out is that many blogs on this topic, they are already quite outdated. Also, Microsoft's own documentation has improved, but it's for real use. For something like these two examples I showed you for reference, and they are not that complete. So, I mean, this for I was looking, for example, a Terraform example for something like this, and they were not complete in a way that for instance, I need to create some custom action for myself and these kind of things. So I hope you find this useful for your projects as well, because for me this has been like a long learning journey already, how to get this working in Azure. I've seen many developers and people struggle with this topic. So then I have QA left. Let me see if I can find my... If there are any questions, just shoot. This is the time. Alright, I hope you enjoyed my session on hosting single page apps in Azure, and it was a good experience for me as well to prepare for this demo, and I hope you liked my examples. Bye bye.